Hi, this video is about stenciling and slip work decoration on cone 6 white clay, which I have never done before. I always do cone 4, so I'm trying something new and something different, and I'll share with you what I find out. But basically I'm going to throw some white pieces and I'm going to apply slips with paper stencils in between and do some hand painting on them. To see whether it works just as good as it does at cone 4. And this is using number 516 clay from Pottery Supply House in Toronto, but I think it would work with MCS from Tucker Pottery Supply and whatever other smooth white bodies you can find at cone 6. So here you go. Okay, in preparing your slips, it's really important that the consistency is suitable for what you're trying to do. If you're going to try and slip trail, then you want very thick slip. If you're going to try and dip a surface coating on a pot, you need it to be a little thinner and easy to run. So let me show you how thick this stuff is, and then you'll get a feeling for what I'm doing. This is the thickness of the slip. It's really thick. Again, it's thick, it stands up in the spoon. See, it's actually really thick. That may be okay for slip trailing, it may even be a little thick for slip trailing. But it's obviously, look, you can see how it lands, it doesn't even settle out, it's thick. So, how can we change that? Well, I use glaze thinner to actually change slips, make them thinner and runnier. And it's a commercial product. You can buy it from Bailey's Pottery in Kingston, New York, and probably from Tucker and Pottery Supply House in your local supply, wherever you live. But it's, you know, this is how thick it is now. So let me get some sodium silicate, and we're going to try it, because I don't usually use that, but I'm going to try it. Okay, this is sodium silicate. I have had this for decades, so it's still good. You can see the slip. It leaves that in the center, it's so thick, you can see that there. So, it doesn't take much. Alright, so you can see, totally thin now. What happens if we make it too thin? If you make it too thin, you have to use what's called Epsom salts, which is basically, as you know, bath salts. So I have a little bucket here. I mix them up myself. And you don't need much of this either. So if I've made this too watery, which I did, we are back to the original. Okay, so you can see you can thin it, you can thicken it, and make your slip to whatever consistency you need for whatever job it is you're trying to do. So that's an important lesson to learn if you're going to work with slip. You need sodium silicate to thin slip, and you need Epsom salts to thicken slip. So both of those, I'm sure you could get at the pottery supply, but you can go to the superstore or your local grocery store and just buy Epsom salts, bath salts, basically. And I make it just by getting a container full of water, and I pour the Epsom salts in until the Epsom salts don't dissolve anymore, and then I know I've got the right density or solution. All right. Now this is obviously too thick again for what I want to do, so let's go back and have a little bit of this. It's a good idea to use something like this to add the stuff to, because it takes so little. So I think you're better off using this to actually put it in, but I can't get it out of here very easily, so I'm just going to go a little carefully. And that's the thickness that I think I need for the job I'm going to be doing. So basically this is now what I would say is a thickness where I could take a mug and dip it in and get a coating of white slip, say on a dark red mug or a brown mug or a black clay mug or something. I'll get a coating of white slip on it by dipping in and then shaking it, and it will run off fairly easy. You shouldn't use slips really thick because you can melt your pot that's underneath the slip surface and make it collapse. Okay, now I'm going to dip a mug in the black slip. This one is also a little bit firm, so it may flake off. I don't know yet. You'll know by the end of the video. There you go. It's a nice coat. So I over-thinned once again with the sodium silicate, and then I thickened up again with Epsom salts to get the thickness I want. And using a little slip trailer like this to add the stuff is a lot easier, because it just takes drips, not a lot. And this will start going matte fairly quickly again. But that's all I'm going to do with this one. Okay, the bowls on the bottom are the ones I normally throw with that size pieces of clay. I've made these I'm going to do slip decorating mostly a little smaller, so they'll be thicker and they can absorb more slip basically before they would crack or collapse. So that's all you have to remember. And the mugs, this one has 2 coats of white on it now, and that's the one that's black over the sort of toasty brown clay. But I'm hoping that I can get 2 coats of clay on this without the handle collapsing and falling off. Because I airbrush my pieces when I'm decorating with slip, so I can get thin, even coats. And I'm trying to do this with dipping and brushing and sponging to actually apply the slip. because not everybody has a spray booth, and I can tell you how to build a spray booth. That's not that hard either, but that's a bit more, space in a studio that you'll need. Now another thing is when I put the handles on, if I'm going to be putting slip on, I will make sure that the handle is attached really substantially. Now these are still really soft. I just threw them about an hour ago, I would say. But anyway, they're so soft I don't need to scratch and score. I'm just going to, these handles are very soft too. They were pulled only about 20 minutes ago. I'm just putting them on and pushing in really carefully. And then shape your handle to make sure it's going down. I let gravity determine, like there's the handle, so I'm just pushing it on to actually determine the actual whether the handle is straight or not. Is it straight? Looks straight to me. Break off a little bit at the bottom. Fold the handle up so I'm doubling up on the thickness there, and I take the little bit that I pulled off the bottom and I make a wedge that I put in between the handle and the pot just there. So we got extra clay holding that on there. And then I take a little tiny bit and I make a little shape like that, put it in there. I'm really thickening up that little bit. Now if you pulled your handles in a different way, you may not need to add it, but I always end up with a little thin area in the center of my handles where my thumb knuckle goes in, I guess. So that's what I'm doing. I'm basically putting on a much more substantial join area for the clay, for the handle. So, brush in the center. Always make it sure, in white clay, make sure the brush is clean so you don't leave a mess in the bottom of your mug. But I can't reach down there, so I basically use the brush to push back. And then I do the same to each one. Efficiency of motion. I'm in the position, so I'll try and get as many things done in the same motion as I can to be efficient. So I don't have to lift my arm up and down, up and down. Sometimes I'll have 6 mugs on the bat. And after that, I can take this little paintbrush here and just push that lump of clay down. And I'm thickening up the width of the join on the actual body of the pot here. So I don't have to pick this brush up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. I'm just doing the same motion on each mug now with this paintbrush. So I always lose things, so I want to make sure once I got it in my hand I can keep using it. We have a big storm coming tomorrow. Supposed to get 3 inches of rain and 90-kilometer winds. Global storming. Now you can make a little thumbprint in it. You know my work, I use my little spiral because everybody can identify my pieces because my thumb for the thumb, that's a spiral on it. Alright, These are ready. They're not too disformed. Where you put your finger there, you might want to just make sure it didn't push out of shape. People do not like it if their mug looks a bit disfigured there. This bowl is one of the thinner ones, and it's fairly stiff now, so I'm going to try putting my stencils on. And the way I do it, if it's really floppy and really kind of hard to handle with a lot of extensions and stuff, you just have to place it down without wetting it, and then slowly, carefully put some water on the piece without tearing it, and it will expand. And so you don't want to press it down too much at first, because it's going to now start enlarging itself, swelling up with the water that we just put on it. And if it's stuck to the clay, it will start to get creases in it. This one is simple, so I'm dipping it in water because there's no appendages and stuff that stick out from it. But I'm trying to get rid of any surface water, rub it into the piece, because that would kind of resist and loop and runny, make the slip a bit runnier. Okay, the next thing you need if you're going to be doing stencil wear is stencils. And I cut mine out of either magazine paper or telephone book paper, which is my favorite, but telephone books are getting harder to find. And you cut anything you want, any shape, animal, insect, bird, fish, you know, abstract, landscape, whatever you feel like doing. But you need a whole bunch of stencils ready to go before you start. Cut them with an X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors, or if you're really techie, you can get one of these new cry-cut machines, but they only cut one at a time, whereas I can cut 10 at a time if I do it with an X-Acto knife, and sometimes if it's really simple, you can make 20 at a time. Almost. It'd be nice if it was perfect first time. Okay, so we're just going to put my hand underneath to turn the wheel. I'm going to hit the rim first. If you get some down the outside, it won't matter because you can actually trim the outside of the piece anyway. See how nice this is flowing? And that's the key. You'll learn through practice that how to get that thickness just right for yourself. And then it'd be nice to go down with one all the way down, and I'm going to do this twice. And don't let a big bowl of clay, liquid clay, build up in the center. So I'm trying to get that as even as possible and lift anything out that goes with me. So I'm going to let this dry for a few minutes, and then I'm going to actually paint a second coat on here. And then after I've got two coats on here, I will then paint these with underglazes to give them a much more detailed clouds and things in the sky. So here's the one that I did white, 2 coats of white last night. I didn't show it in the video because I dipped the other mug and I did it the white just the same as the black mug. So basically this one's got black over brown clay. This is brown clay with 2 layers of white on it, and now I'm going to do a layer of black. Now that will be very even, I have to. It's not dripping unless I shake, so that's the perfect consistency of slip. And now I can shake and it will start running off. So it needs help to run off, which means it will stay where it is on the pot. Oh, there's one last drip there. There it goes. And then you turn it the right way up. Now we have a piece that can be carved using sgraffito, which will have brown, white, and black slip. I have house stencils, roof stencils, trees, sheep, cows, deer, moose. I've got a whole bunch of stencils here, so I can play and just do anything I want. And you can do anything you want. So you could decide to go totally abstract here with triangles, squares, spirals, ragged, torn pieces of paper, whatever shape you want to do. So don't feel restricted, just play. And you know, maybe something good will come out of it, because experimenting is always good. But once again, if you're going to put a piece of paper on a piece of pottery, it's got to absorb a little bit of moisture so it swells up a little bit before you place it down. And placing it down is very important because you want to make sure you leave some space underneath and space above, and I'll explain afterwards. But I'm going to put 2 houses on each one of these, or maybe I can do 3. No, I'll do 2. So dip it, hold for 5 seconds, and then basically place it down, but don't rub it in hard, just let it sit there for a minute. It will slowly absorb some moisture. And do the same to the other one, with the water. Got some moisture in it. I rub from the center of the stencil down. So I have just mixed my white and my black slip together, and I've given myself a kind of a gray and all that. So I would normally use brown here, but I don't have a brown slip mixed up. And you could just use, you know, a little bit of iron oxide in the slip. That would do it. For a brown slip, you could also buy a brown stain. Anyway, I'm going to paint some trees here, so I'm just going to hit the surface, and we could actually make them birch trees if you want. So I'm just dragging the surface like that, trying to get a fairly even coat. With these two, I'm going to add some animals and just do them as animals. So an assortment of animals on the piece. I have a moose here. I'm going to place it down, and is that a scratch or a hair? No, it was just a scratch. Okay. If you find a hair, because the paintbrush is, I haven't even touched this with the paintbrush yet, but sometimes a hair will come off. You've got to get it off the piece. So place the stencil down. Just don't seal it down until it's expanded for a few minutes. I'm going to put another one here, or maybe 3 of these on here actually. Okay, I'm going to dip these in this yellow slip. It was a little thick, so I just added the sodium silicate to it, so it's perfect now. And just drip, drip, drip. I actually got clever and I started using one of my slip trailers to drip it in, so it's very controlled now. But these are going to raise the level of that as I dip it, so I've got to pour some of this out into there to actually avoid overflowing. I'm guessing that's the volume that these are going to fill up. So I take it, and it's a bit slippery, so be careful. Dip it. It doesn't matter if it goes on the handle actually. Yeah, those have to sit for probably a few hours. I'm putting the second coat on these now. This one, I'm going, because I've let it stiffen up, it's now not bendable on the rim, but it's still, you know, I know it's still fairly soft, got a lot of moisture in it. So all I'm going to do, I want to coat the inside with black. I'm just going to pour it in. Didn't need to pour that much, but we will see. Just be careful when you pour it back in there. Okay, so I don't need it on the rim, so I'm going to sponge that off too. We're going to trim the outside anyway. Alright, we just needed it on the center. Now here is something you should... It isn't running to the bottom. If it pools in the bottom, that means you needed to add some Epsom salts to your slip to thicken it up a little bit. Because if it runs to the bottom, you'll get a really thick layer of slip down there, which will end up with a little crack in the middle. And that, you know, especially if you're vulnerable to S-cracks when you're throwing. But this is not pooling. I can see an even coat everywhere. This now has to dry for, at least an hour or two. I'm now going to just play and experiment on some things, work that I don't normally do, but I know how to do. These are sponges that I spent a whole day using a soldering iron and basically made patterns out of them. So they can be anything you want, you just have to do this outside because foam when it's melting stinks. And then you just dip it in the slip. Like the slip consistency should be that you would use for dipping. If it's too thick it doesn't work very well, it needs to be able to soak into the sponge. And then you can simply take a piece that's stiff but not dry and simply start pressing whatever you want to do on it. Let's go with now I'm going to use the dark peacock green, I call it. Okay, I've just cut myself some random shapes of paper sandwiched between a little piece of card. That made it a bit easier to hold them tight together. And so I can take them out of the card. And you can cut these with an X-Acto knife, with a pair of scissors, with a scroll saw, with a bandsaw, anything you think that can cut. I don't think you need anything fancy like a cry cut or anything to do these. But you still have to dip them in water to make them adhere to the clay. There you go. I just use that to stiffen it so I can hold them easier. So I got a lot of pieces of paper, random little shapes. And then I'm just going to take one, dip it in water, and you can do this in any direction you want, but you have to wait till that slip is dry enough so that it won't, melt into the and spread. So it should be dry. Let's make sure. Except for a couple of bubbles, it looks pretty dry, so I think it will work. So we can do things like this. And then when it gets to the top, just cut it off. And I'm dipping them so they're wet. And I cut two different shapes so that I don't end up with a symmetrical pattern type thing. What's underneath that piece of paper is now protected. So you can now just willy-nilly kind of paint, press the paper in. Now clean off all the old slip. Okay, I have another sponge with two ends, different patterns. So I'm going to dip it in my yellow first. And then we're going to leave a gap on. It's going to be, I think I'll try and get a layer down here and a layer up there, so I'm going to do that. Yellow's a light color, so it might need a heavier coat. Ooh, better run, so I'm going to have to sponge that off. I dipped it really thick then to try and get a heavier coat. Don't press hard. Alright, so we've got the yellow. So we're going to have black down here and up there. Now you can do these. Oh no, blue, that's right, I was going to use blue. We used 2 greens before, so we can use blue and yellow this time and finish up with black, I think. See how thick that is? It would run. So I'm going to straighten the edge of it a little bit. You've got to be just the right amount. And then you see, slip between the lines, you can press the sponge and it will suck it back in a little bit. Yeah, let's reverse the sponge a little bit. And then down here, it's a balance, thickness versus Alright, so we've got that, and I'm going to let that dry for a little while now. Squeeze the slip out of your sponge, don't waste any slip. Okay, the mugs are back. I've got my trees. These are hard to cut. Let's get some better light here. Now, first rule of stenciling. If you put something down that is attached to the ground, in other words, standing on the ground, you cannot put a stencil down that will overlap it lower down than that point. Visually, it means that the piece will look like it's floating, though a tree doesn't float. So I'm going to put these down so that they are either absolutely level with the actual house or just a touch above, and then it will look like it's still attached to the ground. So, it's stuck to my finger. So basically, I'm going to attach just there, because that's just a bit above. I'm not going to stick it down yet. The slip is a little tacky, so it's about, I would say, a half a centimeter or 1/4 of an inch above the house. There we go. Get a bit more water on the paintbrush. You don't want it to overlap the white clay. See, I'm trying to avoid wrinkles by pushing up the stencil. Now, they're going to overlap the rim, and you need to get rid of that because that will make your rim unsightly when it's finished, because the branches will be going over the rim and people think that's a mistake. So you can either just put your fingernail there and just tear it off, or you could use scissors, either one. You just want to make sure there's no paper. Sometimes you can fold it back down over the actual branch that it's coming up from. It actually makes it feel funny. It's nice if the tree isn't long like that, so it won't reach the rim, but mine did. I'm using stencils I cut for other projects. I don't throw any of my stencils away, and then just kind of smooth the rim again. So the next thing I have to do is paint some black for the actual roof line. So where the roof is, I'm just going to paint some black. And I'll probably need 2 coats. So I have to wait again. When you're stenciling, it's nice to have multiple projects on the go, because there's a lot of waiting for slip to dry. And of course you can use the heat guns and all the rest of the things, the torches. I never use a propane torch because I am convinced that the residue off the smoke from propane torches leaves a little oily residue, because I used to have some slip problems of flaking and I could never figure out why it was doing it, and then I realized 2 and 2 I was using a propane torch on those pieces to dry them faster. But I do think it leaves a residue. And once again, look to see if you've got any faded areas where the brush stroke shows up and try and get rid of them, but that's why you need 2 coats. I just used this sponge dipped in blue to sponge this bowl here to give myself a layer of coating to play around with stencils stripes on this one too. Okay, now I have got some thinner stencils, same type of thing but thinner, floating around like crazy. So I'm going to place these in between the actual, let's see which way would be better, this one. I'm trying to see if I can get little black lines eventually, because I'm going to paint this black next. And I'm going to put these, I can't move it because it's already stuck, so I would have liked that one. Where's my scissors gone? This one will look a bit better, I think. So we got that. I think that will work this side down. That's just about right. And now you can sponge black onto this, or you can actually paint it on. I have lots of thin lines here between the paper stencils, so I may as well just use the paintbrush and paint it on. That's pretty even. So I'm going to do that 3 times. Now I'm going to use this sponge and I'm going to put yellow over there. It's actually very warm today, but it is raining. We're supposed to get 3 inches of rain today and heavy wind. So yellow slip. Okay, so we've got that in there so far. Okay, I'm kind of getting busy, so I'm going to try blocking out some with a green. And I'm going to be very careful this doesn't run too much. And I'm not going to do it. Yep, that was okay. And it's leaving a little gap in the center, which luckily I was going to put dots in here anyway. So I've got some green splodges. Then I have these, which I found at Michael's Crafts. Just little circle sponges, which are perfect. Making sure I don't let it... It could run, because I'm pushing things a little bit at this point. My hand's wet too. Now, this is pretty busy, but you can cut paper stencils like this, and if you really want to put some time into this, you can paint things in slip onto the paper stencils and allow them to go almost leather hard, but not flaky. So not soft, but not dry leather hard, or kind of a soft leather hard, and then you can apply a stencil with a painting on here, dip it in water, and then place it down, and you can add even more detail to this. I'm not going to do that because that's just an idea that you should go ahead and try. But if you put the paper into water, and this is Uline catalog paper, which I don't use, I'm just trying it. I want to, you know, it's easy to come by because they send a catalog out with every order you place, and then basically place these down. I actually called them once and asked them not to send me any more catalogs, but they always do. I think it's just the way they work. It's a lot of money. It's a big catalog. Oh look, I just found a mug. I was making myself coffee. This mug is 1994 and all that. So this is one of the original stencil pieces that I was doing. It's got some chips on the bottom. But this was from Tom Finney in Oberlin, Ohio, who gave me this clay body recipe back in '94, obviously somewhere around there. Actually earlier than that, I think. And I went up to doing cone 4. That's what took me up to cone 4 originally. I was doing earthenware up to that point, and now I'm going to put my black on. Now I'm going to put the roofs on, so I've got to know which stencil I use and which roof fits. So that was this one here. Dip it in water, place it. You can have a light shining right by you so you can cast a shadow and you can see the edges of the paper. And this is the bigger one. So I'm going to dip these in peacock green slip, and they're going to have to sit then for at least an hour or more. Okay, the bowl that I've been doing, I'm now putting stencils inside just by getting them wet, 5 seconds or longer, just moist, and then you can place them. And this is a curved bowl, so it's a little bit difficult, but birds have feathers, so obviously if you get a crease it may actually end up being okay anyway. So the mugs have got 3 moose on them, and now I'm going to put some yellow trees, and the way I would do that, if I can get you to get close enough in here, actually it's not going to move, there you go, maybe a little better. Wait, do the 5-second rule. Dip the tree in water, line them up. You've got a clean sponge. Four should get around each one. So we'll go back to the first one now. Now this is where, I'm not sure if you can see this, let's move this over so you can maybe see it a little easier. Okay, there's a moose right there. His feet are just there. If I put the tree below the level of the feet, the moose is going to look like he's floating, hovering in the air. So you've got to add the stencil just a little bit higher up than the moose's legs, his feet. Okay, rather than wet the piece down a lot, I'm going to try sponging. And the texture of the sponging might actually make it nicer anyway. I cut the handle down. I'm going to coat the inside of my black crow bowl. We're not going to overdo the slip this time. So I'm just trying to coat the inside right up to the rim without the bowl collapsing. There you go, I've got a nice coating, but I'm going to pour out the slip. That's better, the runs have gone. Oh, there's a little thick build-up just there. My hand's got dirt on it too. A little thick build-up, we'll see anyway. As I said, I normally spray these, and I'm experimenting too. Now we have to let this dry till tomorrow. I've got one of these natural sponges next, and I'm going to give a little texture to the green. These pieces are very soft now, so I got to be very careful I don't overdo it with any of them. And it's been raining all day, so that doesn't help. Yeah, this sponge is nice, it gives a really nice texture. Maybe it'll look even better than airbrushing. Anyway, I've got to wait for these for a long time before I can do the stencil because they're pretty soft. Okay, this piece is firming up a little bit, and the sheen is sort of dulled a little on the actual black. And this was the sort of abstract piece, so I am going to add some extra elements of these, giving the 5-second rule. Pull the surface water off if you can, gently, so it doesn't get the piece too wet. And I'm going to lay them across sort of randomly. And then you have to brush all these bits of paper in. This is the seascape piece with the whale and the other things, so I'm going to try to give myself an appearance of the difference between the sky and the ocean, so I can stop it wobbling. And just a tiny bit of a wobble there. Okay, it's close. So now I'm just going to go with some white on the rim. If I can catch that dribble. There you go. So I think that will give us the feeling of the sky. I don't think we went below any levels of any ships there. That would have been a problem. Little fan brushes. So I'm going to use a little bit of blue and try and give myself a feeling of it'll just texture the sky a little bit. Texture too, so we could use the same fan brush, do a wiggle thing. So I remember I painted 2 or 3 layers of blue over this piece to get a nice even coat, and of course now I'm making it really textural, but that should help with the interest on the piece. Alright, so I think you can see the idea every time, it gives you a feeling of some, ocean and sky. And if you really wanted to go to town on these, you can now paint the sun in, we can paint some clouds in. The clouds are fairly easy, of course. I'm not sure if this brush will do it. I've got an assortment of pine trees and regular trees here. My guess is it will take 3 or 4 on each one. So they're just going to sit on the sponge, just drying out a little bit. And then we take one, and wherever there is a house, the bottom of the tree cannot go below the house. So we'll put it on right there. So it's overlapping the house, but the bottom is just above the bottom of the bottom of the house, so that the house will not look like it's floating. And then where this one has to go behind the level of the bottom of that tree, so we'll go to there and up. And I don't like them to go across the rim. Same again. This one can go lower because the bottom of the tree is a lot lower. And then you can see the other side of this. There's the bottom of the tree. So I've got to go, oh, that's going to go over the top of the mug. So I'm going to cut off the bottom of the tree so I can get it a little lower down so it doesn't go down below the level of the tree or the house, and it doesn't go over the rim. And this one, I'm going to position this one so it's into the handle area, but I've got to make sure it's not going to overlap the bottom of the house or the top of the I think it's just the right size, so I'm going to start it right at the rim of the piece, down, and there's the bottom of the house. So we're good. And then I just stencil in the piece as normal. Sage green, light green slip from the bottom up to there, and then I'm going to dip the blue down to there. This is the abstract, and I'm going to just start. The top of it is firming up, the bottom is very soft, so I'm going to do a layer of white slip, mostly concentrating on the top. If it dribbles like that, just brush it out so it doesn't build into a three-dimensional dribble. At least 2, maybe 3 coats. Okay, the last stencils I'm going to apply to this body of work, I think, is about now. So I have the same idea with moose and yellow trees and green trees, which I'm now going to put it down. And I must make sure that these trees don't go lower down than the moose's feet or the other trees. So I'm going to go a little bit cautious and be a little higher up. There's a little piece of advice. If you have any dribbles anywhere, anything that's really standing out, brush it completely away, because when you put the top coat of slip on, you can sometimes see the thickness or shape of a dribble that's already underneath that layer of slip you're applying. So I like to really brush away anything that might look like it could show through the final layer. So this is what I've been working on throughout the day, and they're all at a point now where I can't do anything else because they've got too wet, and I still have the last layers to do just up on all of them, but I might get to stencil and remove the black vase later today. This is the first one that's dried. I'm not surprised because it's a vertical and it was a little thicker. And I'm just going to take the stencils off now. There was a lot you could do to this still. If you wanted to, you could paint over the top of the surface. But I kind of feel like it's fairly busy at the moment, so I don't want to do too much until I see what it's got. So I think you'll get the idea now. We basically had 2 pattern type decorative areas, and then we just had 1 layer of paper stencil. So we got all this just from 1 layer. And slips actually fade a little bit in the firing, I've always felt, and this is a different recipe than the one I usually use, so maybe this won't, I don't know. And that all depends, of course, on how much stain you put in. I tend to use between 3 and 10% for the yellow because it needs a lot more. It's a light color. And use the point of the X-Acto blade at an angle, not digging in, otherwise you'll end up with bullet holes in your pattern. this was telephone book paper, remember, so it's coming off very easy. I'm very interested to see whether that U-line paper comes off this easy, because they give out their catalogs like all the time. Okay, so that's the one. So obviously now if I wanted to do something else, I can go in and add something else, but that's just the first of the whole slew. Okay, stencil removing these pieces is a matter of timing as well. You don't want to let the clay get too dry, otherwise you get rough edges. So you try to do it, and I'm going to try and show you. It's hard for me to see. I've got a light shining there, so right here is perfect for seeing stencils, and over here it's a little hard to see, so I'm just going to try and lift the corner while it's over there, and then I'll be able to pull it up while you can move it over. There you go. So you're trying to catch the light of the shadow of the edge of the stencil, which is pretty amazing because it's so thin, and then don't let it drop. And there you have a yacht. Well, actually, a schooner. We don't call them yachts. So I'm going to try and find the corner of this one again. As soon as you can see it, you can just... Okay, so I don't recommend doing them when they're this wet, because if it falls back in, the stencil will stick again, and then you've got a big repair job to do. So I would generally stencil remove the top ones when I can do it like about this stage, but the ones in the bottom there I would have waited quite a while until the slip was touch dry, and then you could, it's just harder when the slip is touch dry to stencil remove. But there you go. Lots of hand painting to do now. I'm just going to try dipping the top of this one. Ooh, I was hoping to go a bit lower than that. There you go. I was hoping to get a bit lower. I'll take some of this out. That's better. This is a bit small for dipping because it marked the handle there, but I can try and get rid of that just by the dipping I'm going to do now. There's a couple of grooves here where you hold these buckets, and I think it caught it yesterday. The slip is perfect, so I'm going to dip it down and see if I can get that thing covered up. Just. And then I'm going to wipe the bottom on a little sponge I have here, because I'm worried the bottom, if it gets wet, will actually, because it's probably thin just there, and it might crack. Okay, this is the dotted mug. None of the dots are actually shining, flaking off. So I'm quite happy that that slip seemed to be able to apply and stay on a surface that was fairly dry. What I'm actually noticing is just around my button, there's a couple of little tiny cracks, and that's where the slip gets thick. And the cone 4 slip that I use, where it gets thick, it has the same little cracks. And I think you just have to, I did pretty good here. The slip just has to be thin enough when you dip so that it gives you a coating without getting really thick. Because it's only happening right in the join underneath around the button where there's like a crevice and the slip can build up thicker. So I'm quite happy with this slip. All we got to do now is find out when you fire it if it stays on. This is the crow ball. I'm just trying to position this so you can see. Now, this is an experimental slip, remember? So I'm not sure how opaque it will be after the firing, and I have one dipping here on the whole piece. And I'm not sure if the black that's underneath is going to show through or not. So there's a hesitancy, but I'm going to chance it, because if it doesn't, it'll be a nice example of me showing why this slip needs to be applied thicker, or if cone 4 is actually better anyway. But anyway, same as I did before, I've got to lift up a little bit, look, I can see, and then hopefully the rest will come up as well. Position it. It's still a little wet, the stencil's tearing. When the slip is drier, the stencil doesn't tear as easily, but if the slip is wet, it seems to lift up a little easier. But that's not too bad, it came up mostly in one piece. There's my audience. He's sitting there waiting for his breakfast. And on the other side there's a bunch of pigeons. They're with me all day, sometimes a lot. Okay, this is a little early, but this has gone matte, so I'm going to try doing it now. This is stencil removing the trees. I'm not going to stencil remove the houses. These are birch trees, supposedly, so I was thinking about doing some white stripes across them before I stenciled them, but I decided not to. Now this tree is still far enough away from the house, but one of them may overlap the house, I'm not sure yet. But it's actually supposed to be behind the house anyway. Actually this is the house one, because I have the loose ones as well. That one didn't want to come up very easily. There you go. Here's the house. I can just see the doorway here. There's a window just there, and I can't remember. I think there's a window here too. So because the paper stencil is still there, I would normally use underglaze to do this. Actually, there's a tree there. I'm going to take it off first. The tree is behind the house, so I didn't want the little bit of the tree to actually show up where the door was. So I'm just going to paint a little black where the door is, and I don't have to be careful because the paper's there. And where the window is, I'm just going to paint, and I'm not sure here if the roof is too far down. There's also a window, I think, up there. I should have a piece of paper here that shows me that, one of the originals, but I kind of remember anyway. But now we'll find out. So I didn't have to be careful because the paper was there anyway. It's not for the people who don't like fiddly stuff. So there's your house, windows and doors painted. I don't see any other windows in there, so now I'm just going to peel back. Oh, I didn't quite get enough. So that's when the tedious stuff starts, and you have to just fill in where you didn't get high enough. Oh, there was two more down here. They're raised areas because of the stencil, so you don't have to be quite as careful when you paint in, as long as you keep the brush raised off the surface too. That's the doorway there. I could always paint just a couple of little windows just by hand. So there we go. Now there was a touch of bleeding just there. I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to accept it because it's too late basically. So we got another birch tree here. Make sure you get all the little branches that maybe don't lift, because they will. The paper burns out, but you'll have flaky clay over the top of the burnt out stencil, and it'll actually, it's kind of like an air bubble in the clay at that point. So we've got another tree here. And then we've got the roof. I think I'm going to remove the roof first so I can see a bit easier where the windows may be. And now we know that there are 4. Oh, this was a different paper, wasn't it? So this was a different size piece of paper. So there's a window here. Probably another one here. One above the door, and my guess is there's going to be one over here. So let's just paint in just in case. Because I don't have to be careful. The paper is still there. Give it a couple of coats. Now we'll see if I went too far with it. Ah, another window up on top too. Oh, and I didn't paint the doorway. And you can paint the doorways any color you want. Black's a little depressing, obviously, so maybe you should paint that doorway red. Or, oh, let's make a black window up here too. And the stencil I had badly positioned. Maybe I had the wrong roof stencil there, so now you just kind of go over with your black. It's kind of stayed a little bit. I'm going to go over the whole thing because it's wet and it looks grey where it's wet and darker where it's dry, but that's probably just the way it is. Probably dries a little darker. But after you've got your paper off, you can just repaint things in if you want to. And there's that window. Let's make it black. There's nobody's upstairs. But that window wasn't painted quite over. So I should have had that original. Good idea to get your original so you can see what you've got. And we got that one there. So now all I got to do on this one is paint a little bit like some sheep. Now look, there's a piece of paper left just there. It would burn out, leaving the clay above it, and you'd have a flaky bit. So another one here. So check the pieces. That's why these fiddly little pieces, I'm teaching this technique because I don't do it very often anymore. I do it just when people ask me because it's too tedious for me now. I've done it long enough. There's the roof not going as far again. So I'm just going to paint that in. Just paint it up there as well. I think the black is just going to dry darker. Alright, so we've got houses. Now this is one of the more complicated pieces because we have got lots of layers here. White is the natural color of the clay. Then we did grey, so we got 1 layer, 2 layer, 3 layer, and background 4 layers. So this is a 4-layer piece, and that's when they get really time consuming. Okay, before I stencil remove this one, you can put underglazes over the top of slips, but you cannot put underglazes underneath slips. I've tried it and it ends up flaking the slips. Not every time, and I'm pretty sure it may be the underglazes are different, each color, whatever, but I've had a lot of seconds produced by flaking layers of slip over the top of underglaze, so don't try it, it's just not worth it, unless you don't mind losing a lot of pieces. But anyway, I've got to remove these, so I thought before I remove them, I'd just try a few underglazes over the top. went back and looked at the video that I did of stenciling these abstract shapes down, and there was a gap just in that location here. There was nothing just there. So isn't that cool? You can do videotape while you're doing it, and then you'll see where your stencils are. I'm sure everybody has a smartphone these days who can do that. So that's it. So the brown and the black that I just painted on this is actually underglaze. And I could have painted slips, it wouldn't have mattered. And now I'm painting the regular white slip, just to put some waves in. Put some weight for the boat as well. The underglaze, basically, you just want to make sure that it isn't underneath any slip, because the slip will actually flake off. And the white slip is really interesting to see if it fades at all, because in the cone 4 that I do, the slip actually will fade down a little bit. Alright, so we've got a piece that's just about ready, I think. And occasionally I'll, just put a little bit in the seagulls. Seagulls are white with a little bit of grey and black. Of course, mine are fairly stylized as far as seagulls go. And that's it. That's the end of that one.